Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. If I could please have a roll call.
Freeman.
Aye.
Amobian.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
Baylor.
Aye.
Lombardo.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
Thank you. And if I could have a motion to accept the minutes from our previous meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
Second, all in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, first item is we have an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in a principal amount not to exceed $13 million to pay the property owner's portion in anticipation of the levy and collection of special assessments of the cost of improving certain streets in the city between certain termini by providing street cleaning services and street lighting and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the annual note that we issue every year that funds our annual street lighting and street cleaning program. As we've done in the past, we will issue this note to pay the costs of this year's program, and then when we assess those costs to the property owners, we'll pay back this note with the revenues that we collect next year through the assessments.
Okay. Questions or comments? All right, what would be, oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Just one question.
Barton.
Thank you. Has any, I don't know if this is appropriate to ask any details as far as street cleaning services go. Any of those details as far as, I know there are certain streets that, get so many services, per year. Has that, any of them been increased any, or?
I do believe they adjust those from time to time, so each street or each limit within each street, so sometimes it varies. One street can have multiple limits that have different levels of service, and those get adjusted from time to time by our Public Works Division, but each parcel has a unique level of service for both street cleaning and street lighting.
Right.
And there's a rate associated with each one. So, and I do believe that those do get adjusted from time to time by Public Works.
Okay, but we don't know at this time if it's been adjusted up or down.
They could go either way, and,
Right.
and it's,
That's what I'm saying, the
depending on whether
details
they
here.
figure like that perhaps they need to do less sweeping on a street or more sweeping on a street, they might increase or decrease that level of service.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And in my archives, I have it in my mind that there is a different assessment for unimproved streets as
Yes.
opposed to, the fully improved streets.
Correct. Well, that's really more for resurfacing, though, although, a lot of the unimproved streets do not have lighting, so, and therefore they wouldn't have that component of this cost.
Okay, I thought it was for street cleaning also, because some of the unimproved streets, I think, only get swept a few times a year.
Correct, yes. So there's different levels of service based on the needs of each parcel.
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments? What would be your pleasure?
Consent is fine.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good. Next is an ordinance amending number 81-2022, passed March 28th, 2022, which established the annual appropriation for the current expenses, other expenditures, and the capital outlays of the City of Akron for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2022, and declaring an emergency.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler is going to handle this one.
Mr. Wheeler,
Thank you. So typically, we do amend our budget a couple times a year. This is going to be our first amendment for 2022. And really, the highlights of this one is some inflationary costs for supplies, especially in our public service divisions, cost of chemicals, the costs for parts for motor equipment. They did not kind of align with our original projections, but that's, every municipality, every company in the nation, if not the world, is also facing that right now. In some of our grant funds, we're requesting to add in the other category to cover reimbursable expenses. Typically, when we are awarded a grant, they are, especially in police and fire, are awarded on a reimbursement basis. So until the costs materialize, we don't get reimbursed, and we are kind of asking for, permission to amend to, acquire these items after they've been expended. I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm sure we'll entertain questions. Customarily on these, we ask that we can take a week so we can
That's fine.
look through things and then address, your department afterwards. But would certainly entertain questions at this time. Mr. Lombardo?
Thank you. The request for the neighborhood assistance for the new vehicle, is that for another person, or just the vehicle is, the existing vehicle needs replaced?
So I believe that is for they wanted a vehicle for the animal wardens, which their truck was kind of at the end of its useful life,
Okay.
and they really needed a new truck, so that's what that is.
Yeah, this is actually a request that came up shortly after our budget hearings that we feel like we can accommodate now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. Malley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wheeler. I think Section 3 relates to 6.6 million to address income tax refunds.
That's correct.
Can you kind of describe where we are projected to be this year when it comes to income tax?
So on a net basis, I believe we'll be down approximately 2%. That's about where we are right now. So while we have had our gross collections are up over 3%, as you see here are refunds that we've had, and that's because of the work from home refunds from non-residents. Those are also way up. So the net effect of that is that our net collections will probably be down about 2%. That's my estimate right now.
And do we have any sense of whether that reduction will continue into next year?
I believe we will see some recovery next year. I'm hoping to make the income tax projection flat for next year. We're going to kind of see how the rest of the year goes, but we have seen decent recovery in the gross collections. It's just that we have this work from home, and as people are returning to work a little bit, I expect that to go down a little bit.
Okay, thank you. And thank you also for the information that you share frequently via email about that. It's very helpful. And then also, I know that a number of these are related to inflationary costs, as you mentioned. Is there a sense of, a percentage across the board that we're seeing an increase in costs, or is it, very area specific?
I wouldn't say there's one consistent area that's, the same across the board. The prices for chemicals and water are up significantly more than even the, costs for equipment, for motor equipment. It's hard to track, but as we're running these utilities, we need to be able to amend on a near instantaneous basis, especially if we need to acquire these chemicals.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Do I have a motion to refer this item?
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And if we have questions through the week, should we reach out to Mr. Fricker or Mr. Wheeler?
I'll go ahead and take those.
Mr. Wheeler, you were real quick to point to Mr. Wheeler, I'll tell you that much. All right, very good. Okay, we will refer that item. Next, we have a resolution urging the City of Akron to allocate 10% of its American Rescue Plan Act funding for the provision of holistic community wraparound support in conjunction with Akron Public Schools and declaring an emergency. And Mr. Neal, yes, Mr. Neal, you're online with us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Resolution comes in as to address really the challenges that we've had in our community. I'm not sure if members of council have had a chance to look at the brief that was the supporting documentation. The brief explains what the wraparound support initiative is. The wraparound support comes from basically now what amounts to about a 12-year study in the community, going back to when Project Regima was first formed, and they led a deliberate dialogue conversation within the Lieutenant Brown, Akron General Hospital, down in Scola with the health department. And at that time, we were looking at the Interrupters, a program out of Chicago to address violence. Out of that study came from the grassroots organizations that were participating, and one of the main ones was the WOMB, Way of Mind and Body, came to the understanding that whatever we did, we had to work collectively to address the issues holistically. And so, at that time it was called the Akron Community Collaborative. Ms. Terry Tribe Johnson, who was with Summit County Jobs and Family Services at the time, pulled us in to work with the county, the city. At that time it was Abraham Westcott with the planning department, Ms. Samsel, who was at that time the grant writer for the police department at Kent State University. And the grassroots component of that plan was used to go to join with the city, the county, to go after the burn grant. Those of you who are on council may remember, out of that proposal, we passed legislation to purchase the Neighborhood Mobile Resource Center. The city did not get the grant. Because we did not get the grant, no funding, didn't proceed and never purchased the Neighborhood Mobile Resource Center, which would have made it possible for us to intimately engage our communities. Portions of the grant were enacted by the community. One of the good things that came out of this was, for the first time, a grassroots organization partnered with the city, Kings and Queens, Cornelius Benson, and they cut the grass down at, worked with youth to cut grass down at Summit Lake. Other collaborative efforts were used throughout the community. Fast forward, at Bookto High School, Principal Nicole Hughes, and with the Board of Board of Administration, Ms. Ella McWilliams, when they were looking at a plan for Bookto High School, their plan required a community engagement piece, and this piece, the collaborative community wraparound support, was adopted by the Board of Education at that time as the plan, the community engagement piece for Bookto High School. The principal for Bookto left. And so parts of this plan were never enacted, but the legislation that comes before council now requesting that council set aside 10% is so that each cluster, not ward, but cluster, would have the resources to establish wraparound support as it sees fit for its area. Most of us are familiar when we say wraparound support because of the I Promise School, LeBron James. Wraparound support means that we understand that it's not just enough to feed a child if he's hungry. Why is that child hungry? It's not just enough to deal with, because we're usually dealing with the effects. Wraparound support allows us to go further past just the effects, with the understanding that no one organization can address all these issues, but collectively and collaboratively we can. And so when you look at the proposal, where we asked the city to set aside 10% for the wards, that would allow us to create a sustainable infrastructure so that it wouldn't be dependent on organizations. It would be dependent on the structure and the process that we have in place. I have the pleasure, of course, serving as a councilman for Ward 4. I think my ward, and more so than any other ward, has received more grant dollars coming in through the school system. Millions of dollars. What we have found, and I'd love the opportunity for someone like Ms. Ellen McWilliams to present before this council, is that giving money to organizations to perform their task is good, but when those dollars run out, they don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to sustain the work. And hence you're left right where you were. And in some cases, it could even be worse. So this proposal was based on years of experience of knowing what has worked in our community and what can work in other communities. What wraparound support would look like in Ward, well, since we're not doing this by wards, in the Bookville cluster is different than what it may look like in the Kimmel Garfield cluster, or in the North cluster, or Easter Elliott cluster.
Okay, let me,
Those communities would determine that.
okay, let me come to
And
council.
unfortunately, I think of what we've
Ms.
seen that
Viviano's
we-
just signaled me for your time. I'd like to, let's go to council members, and then we'll
Okay.
have a round of discussion here. So comments or questions from any committee members? And if not, we'll jump straight to any other council members that are either online with us or in the chambers. Yes, let me come first of all to Ms. Samples. Oh, that's right, okay. Mr. Lombardo.
Thank you. Just wanting to know with this proposal here, I mean, we already have, I guess, allocated the dollars from ARPA into about 6 buckets, and I don't have this in front of me, but, you know, one being, you know, youth violence, you know, one going to housing, you know, and there was a water piece of that. So just nowhere, I mean, we already have monies going to youth violence, but nowhere in this resolution does it say, you know, we're going to shave off some dollars from each of these buckets. And I don't know if we can, I don't know if we really can do that, since we've already, you know, have allocated these dollars. So I guess that would be my question. What bucket is this, or buckets is this 10% coming from?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lombardo. Let me go to, before I allow Mr. Neal to answer, let me go to Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess a somewhat similar question. I mean, I think that the intention or the stated goal here is very positive. I think we all believe that, you know, a better partnership with Akron Public Schools and wraparound services are important, but I guess the resolution, as I read it, excuse me, doesn't contain a whole lot of information as to how this will be structured, about how Akron Public Schools will partner with the city to do this, let alone like what we won't fund. And, you know, I've been a strong advocate for more council and community input in how this money is spent, but that requires a process, and that requires, you know, actually having plans and putting things together in collaboration. And it's not clear to me if Akron Public Schools as a board or as a school district is on board with this, how it would be structured in the clusters. And so, you know, kind of confused as to how this would operate.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. And now I'll go to Ms. Amobian.
My question was very similar, but I know that Councilman Neal met with the school board recently and talked about some of this. So would you want to just answer that question, Mr. Neal?
Yes, ma'am. Again, first, I have to ask if...
Hey, Mr. Neal, let me first entertain all the questions from the floor. I'm making a list of questions as they come along, because I want to get everybody covered here, and then we'll come back.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
That's fine, that's fine. I just want to make, yeah, you're over there and I'm here, and I know you can't see us, so that's fine.
No, I just wanted to know, my question was the same as Mr. Malik's question. And I just wanted to know if you wanted him to answer, but I will follow you.
Okay, yeah, we will come back to that. Yes, Ms. Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that my colleagues on council and the sponsor of this resolution were aware that Akron Public Schools received $150 million of their own in American Rescue Plan Act funding. Just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page with that. And I had sort of a follow-up question, concern, which would be after, you know, multiple months of being informed through Guidehouse and other advisors of the heavy responsibility of accountability and record keeping for our ARPA expenditures, exactly how this would work if we were to carry this out, and, I would echo the questions and concerns about a plan, but I guess my concern would be where the city of Akron and Akron Public Schools are statutorily separate legal entities, how the city of Akron could reasonably and responsibly keep its deal in terms of ARPA spending, reporting, and record-keeping requirements. And that's all I've got. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Ms. Samples, I should have come to you next. Are you okay? Are you sure? All right. My apologies. Looking around for any other questions or comments from anyone online, or, okay, now let's come back to Mr. Neal. If we could come back to you. I've kind of jotted down some questions here and give you a chance to respond. I think,
Okay.
if you could, please. Thank you.
Well, let me know if I missed some of them. Let me start first with the question from Councilwoman Holland about working with APS. As I stated, this has been a working process. Last summer, when we got our COVID dollars, and each ward was given $100,000, we were in the midst of working with our plan. Matter of fact, we had shared it with the mayor, brought him in so he could meet Mr. Nicole Hughes, who was the principal at that time of Bookville, Mr. Tamiko Hatcher, and we worked very closely with the school. The school used their ESSER dollars to fund some of the initiatives, and we used our COVID dollars to fund some of the initiatives. We had tracking because we had a designated fiscal agent, Ms. Deborah Turner with Community Cares, who has done work with our city overseeing grants. We had a tracking process so that we could, if you have an opportunity to look at the brief that was supplied, it outlines the whole process, the documentation process, the record-keeping process, not just of records, but of families and students that are engaged throughout the process. But to your point, Ms. Holland, we worked, everything was documented. What needed to be taken care of from the school came from the school's budget. What came from the COVID dollars that we had received came from the COVID dollars. And all that's how we documented that process. Working with, Akron is unique because our schools, although I'm using the term schools, aren't just schools, they're community learning centers. They are collaborations between the city and the school system. There are, outside of our CSO project, it's the greatest investment that we've made, but we haven't leveraged it to the degree that we can to really help support our communities. And it's definitely the greatest investment that we've made as a city in our neighborhoods. So this isn't, like I said, we've already test piloted this last summer and in the fall. In regards to, in regards to buckets, to Mr. Lombardo's piece, just as right now, we have no way of being able to measure the actual impact per ward. We have no way of measuring the actual impact per ward as far as our investment, especially on the youth side. That's not saying that what we're doing is bad, but right now we're investing in organizations, so it's not a holistic investment. With wraparound support, when the programming is connected so that you're able to identify the needs, not just of the children, but of the family. And as I said, because we've done this not just last year, but it was a part of the plan that the city presented for the burn grant, part of the plan that we worked with the county, part of the plan that led to some of the first grassroots organizations being able to partner with the city. We've been able to vet and find out the best way to track this, the best way to document it, and the best way to engage folks in the community. As far as where those dollars would come from, we're talking about, 10%. If you remember last year, council passed a resolution asking that we need to come back to, asking that the U.S. Treasury allow us to establish a COVID-19 local community fund, because we understand that when 2026 comes, the disparities that have been highlighted and exacerbated aren't just going to go away. COVID isn't just going to go away. We're still going to have to deal with some of these things. That resolution that we passed was asking that we would be able to, set up a fund to help us address those needs later down the road. Excuse me, just a moment. I'm in an area. I'm going to move to another office, but if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, looks like you may have froze up there. I don't know, Mr. Neal, if you can hear me, you may need to call back in because we have lost you. Let me come across, until we hear back from Mr. Neal, let me come across here. As far as the folks who work with Guidehouse, has any of this been vetted through Guidehouse or anything? Because I always get nervous when I think about having to pay money back one of these days.
So, none of what's in this specific proposal has been looked at by Guidehouse as part of their vetting process.
Okay.
I would say that this appears very similar to what we have already allocated in the violence prevention bucket, which is an $11.2 million bucket. So I think there's a lot of overlap between what's here and what's in the existing plan.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, he's trying to get back in now.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay, there we go. We have, Mr. Neal's back with us now. Ms. Mobian, let me come back to you and you can kind of repeat your question, that comment that you had been making.
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I don't know where I left off on the questions.
Okay, yeah, I was going, Ms. Mobian, did you have, you want to pick up where we were?
I think did you finish addressing Ms. Councilwoman Holland's question? Because I don't think you got the question that Mr. Mallett had, which is the same question I had.
And just repeat your question, and I'll answer.
I just wanted you to talk about, I know you met with the school board and when you talked about this collaboration, and everybody knows that they did get $100 million in ARPA dollars, and we do a lot of collaboration with Akron Public Schools. But what I wanted you to talk about, if you could, and I know we're short on time, if you could talk briefly about that understanding of what the school board is willing to do and offering to do.
Well, I spoke with the school board, asked them to give 10% as well. If they gave 10%, it would bring each cluster up to about $4 million. They are waiting to have their finance committee meeting, and Miss Diana Autry is over that committee. I've met not just with the school board, of course, at the school board, the superintendent's also there, but I also met with the superintendent and emailed her the packet that was emailed to each council member as a part of the supporting documentation a month or so back. So the school board is looking over to see exactly what they can do. But I think just like us, they understand that what we're doing isn't enough. I mean, we all know what just happened this past week. Under the brief, if you look at the brief, every child within Akron Public Schools will be connected to some form of mentoring program. And it wouldn't just be a standalone. That mentoring program would be connected with their teachers inside the school, and any other organization that's outside in the community so that we can provide that holistic wraparound support. Because the reality is this, a teacher may have one relationship with a student, a coach may have another, a youth pastor another. If you bring those three people together and they know that they're all a part of that support network for that one child, you have a better understanding of the needs, not only of that child, but of their family. And that's what we found to be so powerful about this process. And it, again, for those who asked about process documentation, that's all outlined in the brief. That brief highlights and documents work going back to the year 2007.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from anyone else, any other council members in the chamber? I can express, I think there's the devil's in the details. I'm concerned, I have concerns, as I talked to Mr. Fricker, about, these are not Akron dollars, these are federal dollars. We want to spend them right. So just my concerns, and, and I can appreciate Akron Public School System, if they could get another $14 million. Yeah, I'd want to talk about that too, but, so at this point, I'm just looking for any further comments, and...
Mr. Chairman, if I can speak to your concern.
I see Ms. Amobian's hand, I'm sorry.
Hold on, I keep having muting problems, I'm sorry. Let me ask you this. I realize that we're talking about a whole range of programs and organizations that are presently meeting to firm up what we're doing to address the violence issue that we have in this community. And I know I just heard that there's maybe some overlap, I don't know that. What I'm wondering is there a likelihood that we can test out this proposal in Ward 4, since Mr. Neal has already talked about the history of what they have been doing already with the school cluster in that particular ward. And I think he's already working with Project Anjima and several other groups. So is there a way to do that? If we can't do it citywide, if we could test it out in one ward, just to kind of see what kind of results we could possibly get. And if we can figure out a way to document what their experience could be or will be, and then see if there's any merit to replicating that down the road. But it sounds like a lot of hard work has already been devoted to this by that community. And each community is different, I know that. So that's why we have to look at them in a different way. So, I don't know, that was just a thought I had, if that's possible. And that would be in conjunction with the DICO, the young man who's over the project for nonviolence. So that's just my thought.
Thank you. Mr. Malik?
Sure. I appreciate all the discussion that we've had, and that there, does appear to be a project or a concept for a citywide program based on work that's going on in Mr. Neal's ward. And I look forward to, fully looking through the report that was shared. But it doesn't appear that there's any buy-in for this concept outside of the work that's being done within the Buchtel cluster. And I think it seems like particularly presumptuous and reckless to allocate $14 million and potentially $10 million from Akron Public Schools on the basis of a couple of sentences without any buy-in from hundreds or thousands of people who would be needed to implement this. I agree with Councilwoman Amobian that it sounds like there is good work being done, and I would imagine that some of the organizations that are involved here have applied for the youth violence prevention round. I know the second round of applications just closed, and I believe there were about 80 applications. And so, you know, there's a level of frustration when it comes to resolutions that purport to do these huge things that we're not in a position to do, when it seems like there is like some kernel of work to start us here. So I don't know what other discussion we'd like to make, but you know, I think that would make sense to disapprove this resolution.
Is it a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
One moment, was that a motion? No, I'll see. Okay, okay, very good. Yes, Mr. Neal.
Again, to Mr. Mallett's point, the Akron Public School Board, the Akron Public School Administration, Ms. Ellen Williams, approved this as a part of the plan for the Brooklyn cluster. The county and the city back in 2012 approved this as a part of their plan for the burn grant. So this has been approved multiple times by different segments of our community. And so the folks understand, this is building the infrastructure so that organizations can come and do their work. It's one thing to fund organizations. It's another thing to fund the collaborative process. Under this proposal, as I said, Mr. Freeman asked about the occupation fund. We've already used federal dollars. That's what COVID dollars were. We used the COVID dollars where each councilman got $100,000. We didn't give ours to one organization. We worked collaboratively in buckets, and those organizations that worked in different areas with shared concern, shared those dollars to address the needs in the community and documented the work. So there's no problem with documenting work. Under this, what we would do is put in the infrastructure to leverage the collective work of those organizations that are in that community and make it sustainable. How would we do that? Let me use the example of a construction site. When you go to a construction site, you have all your organizations, you have your plumber, your carpenter, your electrician, all those folks that are good at what they do. But you still need a general contractor, or in essence, a program coordinator, a project manager to oversee that. What will help make this sustainable is having a grant writer for each one of our clusters that will work with all the organizations to go after grants, not with the Knight Foundation, GAR, and Akron Community Foundation. That's just raw money from organizations that they're already going after, but to go after grants outside of our community. And then those grant writers in each cluster could work together with Ms. Samsel and the grant writer for the school board and the grant writers for our foundations to go for larger grants. That's putting in an infrastructure that's sustainable long past when 2026 and these dollars are expensed. Again, what I would love if Mr. Chairman, is for Ms. Ellen McWilliams to come share and members from the community that have been a part of this process to share with council, because this we know, what we're doing right now is not working. And it's unfair to try to put the burden of what our teachers are dealing with in the school system and what's happening out in the community on any one youth organization. They do what they do well within that organization. They are not equipped to take care of what's happening out in the whole community as a whole. That takes us actualizing the African proverb, it takes a village. And that's what this resolution is asking, that we set aside those dollars so that communities can come together and form the collective plan for their clusters that are needed to provide the holistic wraparound support. This is not theory. This is something that has been, like I said, there's actually a 15-year history to this work.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Thank you, Mr. Neal. All right, thank you for each and everyone's comments. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just echo some of the other concerns that have already been shared. I think the idea, the concept is good. I'm just not so sure that the resolution fleshes out, you know, some of the concerns here. And again, I go back to the fact that we have no commitment from the Akron Public Schools to even be a part of this yet. So that's my other concern.
Thank you. Mr. Lombardo?
Yes, thank you. Again, I commend your efforts, Mr. Neal. Just, again, with all the concerns we have here, and especially some of the comments made here, especially by Councilwoman Holland, with the monies already given to the Akron Public Schools, I just want to make a motion for an adverse report.
Thank you.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor of the adverse report, let it be known by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Roll call, please.
Freeman.
Aye.
Amobian. Malik.
Aye.
Baylor. Lombardo.
Aye.
Motion for an adverse report passes 3-2.
Okay, thank you. We'll report that out this evening. And I believe,
Mr.
Sarah, that's the
Chairman?
last item we have coming before us?
Excuse me,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
Yeah, I would like, all the questions that those asked, that were asked by persons, are answered in the brief. So I just have to be honest, it lets me know that the brief was not read. It's a 50-something page brief. And then the other thing is I offered to bring in Ms. Ellen McWilliams and other members from the community to share. Because folks, this is the reality. We've got children dying in the street. We need to put something in place to support those organizations that are out there trying to do this work. And we do not have a holistic approach, and we have not put in place the infrastructure to make their work sustainable. So if this council honestly wants to understand what's taken place over the past 12 to 15 years, please allow for members from the community who have done this work to come and present to you so that you can hear what have been the challenges and what have been the rewards from this work.
Okay, thank you very much. And it is currently 3:44, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Capital budget review will begin at 4 o'clock. Thank you.